Hello, Alexandra here. This channel is for spiral dynamics, stage green, interested in moving to stage yellow or teal and integral. And let's talk about the hidden shadow of green today. And this hidden shadow can be integrated and brought out into the light. I do realize by definition the shadow is usually hidden, but as you get to stage yellow or teal and integral, you're going to become very aware of your shadow, very aware of when you're triggered, very aware of your ego, and it won't be so hidden because of all the work you do in green. So let's talk about the hidden shadow, which can block you from moving to stage yellow and being more effective in your life. One of the biggest shadows by nature of stage green is codependence. Now, of course, anyone can be codependent at any stage, but because green is such an open stage, such an empathetic stage, such an understanding stage, the chances of being codependent are heightened. So sometimes on a small scale, when you're in a group at work of mostly green people, it's hard to make decisions because everyone is trying to include everyone, and sometimes someone just needs to take the lead and make the decision. So that's a very small example of how being so other-centric can be a little bit of a block, but I'm going to give you a bigger example. One common thing at green is because you see the best in people, because you see down to people's soul, because you're so open, you can stay in relationships a bit too long. And you're more at risk of this at green. If you're already a touch codependent and you hit stage green, you really want to watch out for this codependence. The wonderful Jungian archetypist Jean Boleyn wrote a book called Goddesses and Older Women, and she talks about the archetype of Kuan Yin, and this is such an archetype for stage green. Whatever gender you identify with, Kuan Yin is the pattern of being a generous bodhisattva, and Boleyn talks about the risk of being codependent when you are embodying Kuan Yin, and a lot of greens are activists and beautiful caretakers and conscientious, and so that Kuan Yin archetype is very active. She says, bodhisattvas are dedicated to the universal awakening of everyone. They exist as guides, and the qualities associated with them are compassion, kindness, gentleness, responsiveness, empathy, and helpfulness. And simply giving people what they want or need. And then she goes on to say, this archetype can be at risk of codependency because you're putting yourself second to people. You're so other-centric. You're at risk of putting yourself second to someone else who is self-centered. They may not be addicted to alcohol, but they could be a driven workaholic or obsessed with something else. And the result, she says, is not a match made in heaven. It's a relationship between someone narcissistic and someone who is other-centric. And she really wants to talk about the risk of not bringing in the segment archetype. Let me get into archetypes because they're very yellow, and if you want to get to yellow, reading this book, Goddesses and Older Women, or any of her books are a way to be much more aware of your blind spots. So let me just throw in what she says. Sekhmet, the lion-hearted goddess, is the goddess of saying no, of saying enough is enough. And so what you want to do at stage green is just check in with yourself and ask yourself, are you setting those boundaries? Do you need to redefine some relationships? Do you need to reach out for help and get counseling or go to a 12-step? Do you need to step back from a relationship? This is so hard at stage green because you're so full of love and so supportive and so other-centric. And if you want to get through stage green, get to stage yellow, make your life a lot easier and more grounded, reach out and get professional help. Don't do it on your own, because stage green is such a beautiful subjective stage. You can get caught in your own beautiful world, and sometimes that turns into a little bit of an isolated world. So reach out for that professional help. You'll be more grounded, and stage yellow is really a stage of utilizing resources, finding the best and most effective resources. So the more you experiment with reaching out and getting professional support, you're going to be working on yourself, reducing your shadow, reducing codependence, and moving towards yellow. Also, I want to talk about the shadow of green, especially in politics. There is something called mean green. You may have heard of it. An example of mean green is where back in the day, folks would take spray paint and run up to people in fur coats and spray paint the fur coat. Obviously, this is a terrible idea, especially if someone is using spray paint on someone who's elderly. It's dangerous. You could get spray paint in their face. You could, they could breathe in spray paint. And also, not a great idea to damage property, regardless of what you believe. So the shadow in green in politics is that green can be so triggered because you are so compassionate and you hurt for the world and you hurt for other groups of people and you hurt for the underdog and you hurt for the marginalized. You are so sensitive and such a naturally prone to activism that green can be scolding. And green can be very triggered by the earlier stages. So you want to watch how you're communicating across lines. And green is all about compassion. So you want to make sure and just be very understanding. A lot of the earlier stages, like stage blue or stage amber, when they're in their stuff, for instance, they might be in us and them thinking, they might be in black and white thinking. They can't help it. So you're the one who's going to have to do the work and communicate in a way that is very skilled. One example of this is happening right now in 2025, where you see such polarization in the US, such polarization in politics, but you have Bernie Sanders and AOC going out on the Stop Oligarchy tour. You have these progressives who are pulling in audience members that are members of MAGA. So that is a great way to message, to reach across boundaries, to reach across borders. Very surprising, this coming together of opposite ends of the spectrum. Because of their messaging, they're finding the commonalities. They're talking about populism. And this is what skilled communication at green can do. You can bypass the scolding. You can bypass the outrage. I know it's hard not to feel outrage. There is so much hurtful stuff going on right now in this country and in politics. But watch that shadow and make sure your communication is effective, and make sure you don't look down on the earlier stages, but watch the videos on stage blue and watch the videos stage amber and integral, so you're better able not to be so deeply affected and triggered and hurt. And stage green can even go into martyrdom, outrage, being incensed, and you really want to watch out for that, because you're the one who is going to end up hurting and suffering, not the other people who are, quite frankly, perhaps doing insensitive things, unconstitutional things right now in our country. Yes, there is a lot to be outraged about, and the news channels and the political podcasts, some of them are excellent, aren't helping. A lot of these really talented political podcasters who used to work for former presidents on either side of the aisle are so skilled at what they do, but basically they're still podcasting at stage orange. It is not solution focused. And if you're green and you're watching a lot of the podcasts that circle around and around and around and around in outrage and what, some of the progressive podcasts are very factual and they do an excellent job fact checking, but it's always about what the administration did, what he did, and there's no answer, and that can be very depressing. So if you want to get to stage yellow, be solution focused. Maybe cut back on some of these podcasts and watching the news and create your own way to give to certain nonprofits that help out, to call your senators and your congresspeople, and to remain a little bit action oriented. And remember, you can't save the world. You can be very self-sacrificial, but you've got to practice self-care right now in this time of polarities, especially if you're at stage green. I do want to talk about another shadow of stage green, which I touched on. Stage green can look down on earlier stages and even look down on later stages. Stage green tends to think it's the stage, unless, of course, you've been watching videos on the adult stages and you're integrally informed. Stage green makes a mistake of thinking that yellow is hierarchical. That's not actually true. Stage yellow is very, very interested in the stages. It's the first stage that almost becomes obsessed in a good way about learning about the stages. And they're actually thinking in holarchies. A holarchy is sort of the technical definition is about a natural hierarchy that is an order of increasing wholeness. That's really abstract. It means that the later stages become more whole, they transcend and include. And folks at stage yellow are not actually hierarchical. They are very, very aware of their ego and the dangers of spiritual materialism, and they understand that every stage is so valuable. We need every stage, and they also understand that maybe every stage doesn't want to transcend their stage, and that's okay. Everybody is valuable, and stage yellow does realize that. They are not hierarchical. They are very, very on guard for their ego, and the last thing that stage yellow wants to do is presume it's better than any other stage. However, stage yellow understands that it's a useful stage, and that's the benefit of going from stage green to yellow. And of course, you may be in stage green for 7 years, 10 years or more, but you can just take the bullet points from stage yellow and ground yourself out, because stage yellow is sort of, they've included the compassion of green, but they're also highly effective. And you can listen to a lot of videos on stage yellow and just take what you like and use it in your life. There's one last thing I want to talk about with the shadow of green, and I really learned about this in an integral group that was talking about turquoise. The leader of this integral group, or the facilitator, I think is at stage coral, and had done a lot of coaching with greens. And when he started talking about this, I realized it's true. Green is a very empathetic stage, and boy, if you've been through something, you are going to empathize with the other person. However, here's the little shadow part. If you haven't been through it, you're going to be imagining what it's like for the other person, and that is not always accurate. For example, I have a friend with an uncommon health challenge, and she explains that this health challenge is seen maybe about 20 to 30% of what she actually goes through by her green friends. They don't see all of the context and the different facets. And because green is so non-hierarchical, they tend to say things like, I totally understand, me too, I go through that exhaustion too. And this person is actually a little bit, with the health challenge, invisible in plain sight. One really great way to offer compassion is to ask questions. Don't assume you understand. Don't assume you have empathy, because it can be very isolating for someone if you mistakenly think you understand. You've got to be very careful about what you imagine versus the person's actual lived experience. And one of the best things, instead of saying, I understand, I completely understand, me too, is to just hold space for that person and assume you don't know everything, and be more focused on questions. Or if they don't want to talk about it, just allow them to be without assuming that you understand. This is a gift, especially to people at stage yellow, who actually they don't necessarily need empathy. They love being solution focused. So sometimes they don't even want to talk about their problems at length, because then they're getting stuck in the problem and circling around and doing the martyr thing. So just understand that at every stage, compassion is expresses very differently. At green, it's group focused and non-hierarchical, and I understand, and me too. At yellow, it's action, taking the right action, doing the next right thing, being very solution focused. And at turquoise, compassion starts to be a little bit impersonal. And so be a little bit careful about thinking that you understand people at different stages, or thinking that you understand everybody. It's a little bit of a gift to just give a person space and hold space for that person. I hope you found this content useful. Sending you love and blessings, and I'll see you in the next video.